And let's start with some international news first, with South Africa's ruling party, the African National Congress, has confirmed that it will recall the South African President Jacob Zuma. The ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule has said this when briefing the media in Johannesburg about the ANC's National Executive Committee meeting on Monday night. He also said that the NEC had resolved to recall Zuma and will brief the Parliament caucus later on in the day today. The Israeli police has recommended the indictment of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on charges of bribery in 2 cases of criminal investigation. But the Israeli leader has called the allegations as baseless and is vowed to remain in office. It will ultimately be up to Israel's Attorney General to decide whether to charge Benjamin Netanyahu, a process that could actually take several weeks or even months. The New Jersey man Ahmed Khan Rahimi, convicted of planting bombs in Manhattan's Chelsea neighborhood, has been sentenced to life plus 30 years plus life. Now, Rahimi had sat in a courtroom packed with spectators, including some of the people who were injured when one of his bombs exploded on the 17th of September in 2016. The WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has lost a legal bid to persuade the British authorities to drop further action against him for breaching his bail conditions when he walked into the Ecuadorian embassy in London in 2012. The supporters carrying banners reading "Free Assange" outside the Westminster's Magistrates' Court expressed their disappointment. Julian Assange's cat provided a counterpoint of light relief after a British judge refused to halt legal proceedings against the WikiLeaks founder for jumping bail and fleeing the Ecuadorian embassy in London in June 2012. But the cat, which goes by the name Embassy Cat and has more than 32,000 Twitter followers, has been known to don different ties on different occasions. It is believed that the cat was given to Assange by his children in 2016 to give him company at the embassy. Now, thousands of mourners attended the funeral prayers that were held on Tuesday in Lahore for Pakistani human rights campaigner Asma Jahangir. Jahangir, who faced death threats by fighting for unpopular causes and was jailed in the 1980s for her pro-democracy work during the military rule, had died on Sunday in Lahore. The U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson arrived in Amman and Jordan for meetings during his regional tour. Now, Tillerson also had meetings scheduled in Egypt, Turkey, Kuwait and Lebanon. During the tour, Tillerson will be discussing various issues, including the crisis in Syria and also the reconstruction of Iraq, the State Department said in a statement. Restoring the unity of the Gulf nation remains in the interest of all parties in the region, the U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said, urging them to resolve a diplomatic dispute over the state of Qatar. Last June, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain had severed ties with Qatar, accusing it of supporting terrorism and also opening up the worst rift in years amongst the U.S. allies. Qatar has denied all forms of allegation. Mick Mulvaney, the director of the U.S. Office of Management and Budget, defended the spending proposals of U.S. President Donald Trump to the Congress. Now, Trump's request for $4.4 trillion in terms of spending includes large increases in military programs but cuts sharply the funding for the domestic programs in terms of healthcare, education and assistance for the poor. The U.S. President Donald Trump has said that he was considering a range of options to address steel and aluminium imports that he said were unfairly hurting the U.S. producers, including tariffs and quotas. Trump's comments came in a meeting with a bipartisan group of U.S. senators and representatives. Some of the lawmakers have urged him to act decisively to save steel and aluminium producers in their states, but others have urged caution because higher prices would hurt many manufacturers. United States broke ground on the site of its massive new diplomatic headquarters in Mexico, making it one of the most expensive embassies in the world at a cost of nearly $1 billion. The new site is a joint venture from the award-winning American architectural teams of Todd Williams, Billy and David Brody Bond, and will be built across an 8.5-acre site in the Nuevo Palanzo district. A budget of about $943 million has been set aside for the project. Canada's chief negotiator at talks to modernize NAFTA on Tuesday has said that the United States aimed to weaken Canada and Mexico rather than ensure that all three members of the trilateral trade pact benefited from it. Steve Verhall has said the talks had achieved little progress on major issues so far, and also complained about the inflexibility of the U.S. negotiations. German Social Democrat leader Martin Schulz has stepped down with immediate effect on Tuesday and said that the party's committee had backed parliamentary floor leader Andrea Nahles as his successor. Nahles still needs to be formally nominated by the party executive. A vote will then take place at an extraordinary party congress on the 22nd of April. A plane crashed near Moscow on Sunday which killed all 71 people on board could have been caused in part by instruments showing incorrect speed. Now, the instruments could have malfunctioned because sensors had iced over, said the Russian Interstate Aviation Committee, which is presently investigating the reason for the crash. The Hong Kong Special Administration Regional Government Headquarters lowered the Chinese national flag and the region's flag on Tuesday morning to remember the victims of a fatal bus crash on Saturday. The officials and the staff at the headquarters observed a minute's silence. Many groups and people from all walks of life held events to express their condolences. China will continue to revitalize the countryside. Chinese President Xi Jinping has told villagers in suburban Chengdu. Xi Jinping, also General Secretary of the Communist Party of China's Central Committee, was in the Zhanghe village to see as to what the villagers have achieved in using the internet to help sell the local products. He also said that the central government has in fact unveiled a plan to revitalize the countryside, which will boost incomes in the villages. Now, two ethnic armed groups in Myanmar have signed a ceasefire with the government as leader Aung San Suu Kyi seeks to revive a stuttering peace process to end decades of conflict. The peace process, which has been eclipsed in media coverage by the plight of hundreds of thousands of Muslim Rohingyas fleeing into the neighbouring Bangladesh from violence in the northwest, has been Aung San Suu Kyi's stated top priority and also key to unlocking the resource-rich country's potential and guaranteeing development for its more than 50 million population. Colombia's National Liberation Army rebel group attacked a series of toll booths on Sunday during a three-day national blockade to protest the government's suspension of peace negotiations. According to authorities, armed rebels forced toll booth workers in the northern Cesar department to leave the structures in the northern Cesar department before blowing the booths up with a dynamite. The demonstrators blocked roads in towns around Addis Ababa on the second day of a strike call to protest against Ethiopia's continued incarceration of the opposition politicians. The three-day strike across Oromia province, which surrounds the capital, was in fact held as an opposition leader remained behind bars despite a mass pardoning of dissidents aimed at reducing unrest that has simmered since at least 2015. Dutch Foreign Minister Halbe Zijlstra quit after admitting that he had fabricated a story about attending a meeting in 2006 at which he said that Russian President Vladimir Putin had outlined a strategy for building a greater Russia. Now, the incident has embarrassed Prime Minister Mark Rutte's coalition government, which has parliamentary majority of just one, and further strained the difficult ties with Russia. The 3 people died and 4 others are missing after a migrant's boat carrying about 8 people capsized in a river that flows between Turkey and Greece. Now, the boat was travelling along the Maritsa River in Turkey's northwestern province of Edirne when it suddenly capsized early on Tuesday. A Turkish court has sentenced the lawmaker from the main opposition party to nearly 6 years in prison in a retrial for disclosing government secrets, sharply reducing his initial sentence. Enes Berberglorian, Istanbul representative from the Republican People's Party, was accused of giving an opposition newspaper a video purporting to show Turkey's intelligence agency trucking weapons into Syria. Several hundreds of people formed a human chain across the river Elbe and lit candles outside the Frauenkirche, the church to embody the horrors of the war, in remembrance of the bombing of Dresden by World War II Allied forces on the 13th of February in 1945. Dresden, untouched by bombing just months before the end of the World War, was attacked by 2 waves of British bombers 3 hours apart on the night of the 13th of February in 1945. A nun whose recovery from decades of debilitating back pain was declared a miracle by the Catholic Church. This when she stood up, removed a brace from her gnarled foot and walked normally for half a life. 78-year-old Bernadette Moriou had suffered from sciatic nerve trouble that made it hard to walk, but she recovered suddenly after a trip in 2008 to the fabled cave and spring water shrine at Lourdes in southwest France. The former Guatemalan President Alvaro Colom and also a former finance minister who is now chairman of the Oxfam International were arrested on Tuesday as part of a local corruption investigation. The public prosecutor's office has said that Juan Alberto Fuentes, a former finance minister, who is presently the chairman of Oxfam International, was also amongst those who has been arrested. Kosovo expects to resolve outstanding issues with Serbia this year by reaching an historic agreement that will pave the way for the Balkan country to get a seat in the United Nations. Kosovo seceded more than a decade ago from Serbia, but its independence has not been recognized by Belgrade, which together with its traditional allies Moscow and Beijing have blocked Pristina's bid for the United Nations seat. Venezuelan migrants seeking refuge in Peru have called on the Lima Group to take measures against the current senior officials in Venezuela and to design a plan for humanitarian aid and reconstruction of the country. The Lima Group is a regional Latin American grouping including Brazil, Argentina and Mexico that is meeting in Lima to discuss Venezuela's crisis. Over 22,000 people fled Congo to Uganda last week following a surge of ethnic violence in the northeast, raising the total number of arrivals to about 34,000 since the start of the year. At least about 30 people have been killed in the fighting between Hema herders and the Lendu farmers in the province of Ituri this month, echoing clashes that had killed thousands of Hema and Lendu during a civil war that had ended way back in 2003. The more than 700 patients in the besieged Damascus enclave of eastern Ghouta now await medical evacuation, a World Health Organization spokesperson has said, and a top UN official has also said that the particularly vulnerable area of eastern Ghouta had already reached a breaking point. 21 of the patients have died because they were not evacuated due to lack of authorization and now renewed violence. The tropical storm Sanba made a landfall in northern Mindanao, Philippines on Tuesday, causing heavy rains and flooded residential areas before weakening into a tropical depression. The videos shared on social media by local residents showed people wading through floodwaters in Surigao del Sur province. A climber was critically injured after falling up to 1,000 feet on Mount Hood in Oregon, and 7 to 15 other people remained stranded on the mountain in difficult conditions. The injured man was airlifted to Legacy Emmanuel Medical Center in Portland, Of those still stranded on the mountain, at least one person has reportedly sustained non-threatening injury. Prince Harry and his American fiancée Meghan Markle visited Edinburgh on an official joint visit to Scotland ahead of their marriage in the month of May. They visited Social Bite, a charity that runs cafes and also distributes food to the homeless, as well as employing staff who've been homeless. The eatery has attracted visits from other high-profile names such as actors George Clooney and Leonardo DiCaprio. The 164 couples took part in a government-sponsored mass wedding west of Manila ahead of Valentine's Day. Filipino couples exchanged vows in a free civil union held inside a covered gymnasium aimed at impoverished residents and indigenous people in the town of Subic. And Filipino pet lovers went on a date with rescued dogs at an animal shelter in Manila ahead of Valentine's Day. The Philippine Animal Welfare Society Animal Shelter allowed its visitors to socialize with some of its rescued dogs one-on-one inside decorated booths to promote pet adoption and love for dogs. The participating dogs and visitors were given snacks in exchange for a $6 donation to the shelter. A new exhibition at the Musée Marmottan, Monet, presents a little-known aspect of Jean-Baptiste Camille Corot, a French painter celebrated for his influence on impressionists such as Monet and Degas, while he was primarily known for his landscape painting and nature studies. The exhibition Corot les Peintres ses Modèles chooses to highlight Corot's skill at painting figures. The effigies of the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and the leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, met face-to-face at the Olinda Carnival in Brazil. With the giant effigy of Donald Trump paraded on the streets, it coincided for the first time with a huge effigy of Kim Jong-un, measuring almost about 4 meters in height and 22 kilograms in weight. Carnival revelers dressed in colorful costumes and danced with electronic music and Superman at an alternative block party in Rio de Janeiro. Superman surfed through the crowd and sang with the band, while a figure of E.T. in a bikini gyrated along to the percussive music at the Let's Go E.T. block party carnival in Brazil, which ends today. The Malayalam actress Priya Prakash Warrior has beaten Sunny Leone to become the most searched celebrity in India on Google after her clip from the song Manika Malaraya Puvi went viral. Now, Bollywood actresses like Deepika Padukone, Alia Bhatt and Katrina Kaif were the most searched celebrities after Sunny Leone. And interestingly, the Malayalam actress has gained over 2.3 million followers on Instagram after the video was released. Well, the first look of Arun Dhawan and Anushka Sharma starrer Sui Dhaga, Made in India, has been unveiled. The film is reportedly centered around the Make in India campaign launched by the government, written and directed by Dam Laga Ke Haisha director Sharat Kataria. The film is scheduled to release on the 28th of September. Karan Johar says that he is not taken as seriously as Sanjay Leela Bhansali or Rajkumar Hirani because they are intense filmmakers who do their work and nothing else. He's further added that he was a victim of perception. The filmmaker is famous for making movies that portray essentially what are love stories, and Karan Johar is also famous for his talk show Coffee with Karan.